Hello, welcome to Nerdist Book Club number 2 today. We are live on Nerdist YouTube and Geek and Sundry's Twitch channels. I am Rachel Heine, and joining me as always are my lovely co-hosts, Maude Garrett and Hector Navarro.
Also known as Maude Hector.
I know, if you joined us earlier today, I've made a very specific choice to not make that mistake that I did earlier, which was to call them one being, Maude Hector, like some sort of transformer. Hey, we got up this morning and had an episode of this, and I had coffee when I never have coffee, so now I have wine, and I'm sorry in advance. Thank you to everyone at home for joining us. Cheers. And thank you for joining us if you did twice in one day. If you missed it, we had a very special morning episode of Book Club to discuss the Dune trailer. Make sure you check that out after this if you haven't already. And you can also head over to the Nerdist Twitter account for your chance to win a free download of the Dune audiobook.
It's worth it.
And we had a great time. Have you guys thought of anything since I last saw you? So it feels like it's been forever.
I saw someone was complaining about the saturation message. And I was like, that's what I really liked about it. Someone's like, can we just stop directors from just like, screwing with the saturation? And I'm like,
well, apparently we were saying his name wrong. How do we say?
Denis Villeneuve.
Okay, well, I'm not surprised that I didn't get that.
That can't be right. That can't be right.
I like Denis Villeneuve. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to anyone who's French or speaks French. And Miss Necromancer says Maude Hector, and Garrett Navarro also thought about saying that. Reading Dodo Kiwi, Maude Hector sounds like a Dune character anyway.
Maude. Yeah.
I also...
Garrett Navarro needs to be a protagonist in something. Garrett?
Yeah, Garrett Navarro, yeah.
Yeah, Miss Necromancer in the chat, in the YouTube chat, says Garrett Navarro is Hector's preppy, overachieving elder brother. Yeah, that's what that's.
Oh my God! Or your bizarro alter ego.
The Stefan to my
Garrett Navarro.
Yeah, well, we are going to be talking a lot about alter egos today and sort of the idea of Jekyll and Hyde, because we're breaking down Jekyll and Hyde Park from Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. Thank you. We're gonna dive into the book first and kind of go through our thoughts and everything, and then talk about the show, because there's a lot to talk about from last week's episode. But general thoughts, what did y'all think of this section? Both Maude Hector and the chat, please.
I really liked this one. I felt like it was a very sort of different pace. I felt like the point of view perspective was really, really quite interesting. I mean, I know that before, like Hippolyta, she was like talking about her story, but for this one, like it really, I have a very strong like visualization when I'm reading these, and it felt very video game-esque, where it was like going inside a body and then having first-person view in this new thing, and like, looking at the hands in front of you and seeing they're different, but walking along the street and noticing people's, observations of you and how that shifted. It felt very FPS, not a shooter, just first person view for me. And I really liked that. But it was also super interesting hearing the different perspectives of how much a life changes when you look different, and how she explored that and what was important to her first, the relationships with police, like everything. I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny that Maude thought about a video game and how we interface with the world, because I thought about a comic book. There's this old, really unfortunate issue of Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane. There's a Lois Lane comic book issue from the 70s when the creators were trying to be more socially relevant. And in this issue, Lois Lane, spunky gal reporter, transforms into a black woman for a day. And it is, on paper, it seems very interesting, and that you can tell what the writer and the artist were and what like the editors and stuff, like what they were trying to say, what they were trying to do. They're trying to bring that perspective, but ultimately it comes from a era of comic books where they tried to have bite, but when you go back and read them now, they feel a little bit toothless because it's like, oh, they can only say so much, and they still definitely held back a lot, and they weren't really super honest, and they were trying to package something that was happening in the world, you know, which was like systemic racism. And not only that, but at one point Lois Lane as a white woman, and then later in the story as a black woman, goes to like an area of the city of Metropolis that was mostly black, and people were protesting something. I forget what it was. So that was all happening in the 70s, right? That was all part of it. And
yeah, that's all over, right?
Yeah, totally. They solved it. They solved
solved.
racism. They solved racism. Well, it was in the 90s. And then, of course, when Barack Obama was elected, no more racism in the United States. But
if you don't have a sarcasm filter,
yes,
sarcasm. YouTube.
But the best and worst thing about this comic, because I actually had a chance to read it. I think it hasn't really been reprinted for obvious reasons. It would need to be reprinted with a lot of like disclaimers of like, warning, they were trying, and this is very
they did their best for the time.
Right. This is very racially insensitive. But at the end of this story, I have to tell you guys this. Lois Lane, so she goes into a machine and then she comes out and she's a black woman, right? At the end of the story, she confronts Superman and she goes, well, Superman, do you still love me like this? And then Superman's like taken aback. He's like, and before he can answer, before the story commits to him saying what should obviously be yes, then she transforms back into white Lois Lane, like the pumpkin expires, like it was only like a 24-hour thing. So then Superman like doesn't have to say anything. And you're like, oh my gosh, you guys could have done something pretty cool for the time. So this section reminded me of that, in that it was, although of course this section was done better, but I'm just saying the whole fantasy conceit of inhabiting another person's body, I thought was, it also just makes me, just like each one of these sections, more and more curious about the work of H.P. Lovecraft to begin with, because I'm like, is this drawing inspiration from a Lovecraft thing, or from some other, or just from sort of the genre, the time, you know,
the folk genre? Yeah, it does feel a little, and the show as well, I think it feels like they're pulling from distinct references, you know, both the episode and the book for Abdullah's book when they go in, although we'll talk about that, but it got changed. Obviously Indiana Jones, but as I was saying last week, also a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe, like Pit and the Pendulum, which actually was in this one, which I thought was fun. And the very sort of structure of the book and the show are sort of these pulp short stories that are interconnected. So I'd have to ask resident Lovecraft expert Kyle Anderson, which I will do after the show. But I do think that this one, I do like that they're pulling from these sort of gothic, pulpy stories like Jekyll and Hyde, or the Metamorphosis, sort of a subversion of the Metamorphosis to draw from.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this section it's not my favorite section of the book so far. I'll probably still go with Hippolyta Disturbs the Universe. I love that section so much, and that freaks me out.
This one's my favorite. And a lot of people in the chat, this is their favorite as well. But just happening is, does Hillary and Ruby in this, are they two entities in the one body, or is Hillary kind of spurning on Ruby's sort of like deep dark desires that she's now able to see come into fruition? So it's like, are there two people living in the body? Because we know that she has, obviously Hillary is alive and not conscious, but using her body to kind of, or like her soul to be reanimated. It's like when you I was just rewatching Buffy, like you do.
And there's an episode where in season 7 where Willow, there's a hex curse put on her, where she gets to, basically the curse is whoever I'm cursing decides their form of punishment, because it's way more creative than anything that this witch could come up with. And she turns into this evil character that everyone hates. He's the worst. He's basically every dude in your Twitter replies or other things that's just being the worst, but then, you know, murderous after that. And sorry, that was my calendar. But it's funny because she throughout the day starts feeling like she's turning into him. and saying things that he would say, like really misogynist stuff. And she's a gay witch woman. So it's like, it's darkly funny, but also I never saw it that way in the reading, that she could be sort of being pulled into this other entity. But I would love to know what people in the chat think, that if it is her kind of doing that, or if Hillary is becoming her own entity. Miss Necromancer, again, with the genius remarks. Interesting that Hillary decided to go with the last name Hyde, as Hyde is the evil side of Dr. Jekyll.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hillary also goes with the last name Earhart, which I was like, that's too on the nose. These people are going to know that's a fake name. You just walk in with an Amelia Earhart haircut and you say your name is Hillary Earhart and you want to be, you know.
No, it's Everest.
I think at one point she was Earhart. I think she had like a couple different last names and then she settled on.
Yeah, she tried a few. Yeah, Hillary, Hyde, Hillary. I wrote a couple.
The Everest one was really funny because she
Hillary Everest. Yeah,
like that is so obvious that like they're making that up. There is no way.
Also the pioneer. It's interesting because Letitia wants to pioneer in terms of buying a house in a white neighborhood, and Ruby is resistant to it. Mm-hmm. But then she's picking last names of pioneer, female, well, Everest, I guess, wasn't this, but like people who pioneered things.
But I mean, you have to realize that when we're kicking off this story, she's very unemployed. And I think that there's a part of this that not necessarily resonates, but it kind of sat really heavy in my heart. And that was just her mantra when bullshit is consistently her, and that is, it is what it is.
Yep.
And that's like that coping mechanism where it's like, this won't change. This is my life. You know, you should be lucky that I'm even paying you. She's like, what, for not stealing earrings? Because I didn't do it and I covered for your sister and now you're not paying me what you owe me? You pay me what you owe me. And that was in the episode, which I thought was interesting.
Yep.
Talking. It just sounds like a song.
Yep.
But I
melodic way to say it.
I thought so. Mm-hmm. But the whole, it is what it is. Like, far out, man. Imagine having to talk yourself down from situations by that sort of defeated acknowledgement.
Well, and it's interesting too, because the phrase "it is what it is" has been popping up a lot in political news recently. And it's very interesting to see the dynamic of someone who is actually, you know, stuck and helpless in their own environment, and that's their mantra to like get them through so that they don't go completely bonkers. And then someone evil who is saying it because they really don't care and just care about themselves. And I like, when I read that over and over again, I was like, wow, this is like the polar opposite of what it is in the news. It's Trump. Has been happening about, you know, deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. And there is this, it's just the two most extremes of someone who is trying so hard to do the right thing, fit in however they can, even though the entire deck, a bunch of decks are stacked against them. I just kept thinking about that every time she thought that or said that.
Yeah.
But let's dive into what happens, because Maude, you were talking a little bit, but basically we're in Christmas time, you know, magical time for some. I do love Christmas movies, but generally not the holiday itself. But Ruby's working at a party where some earrings are stolen. Obviously her manager stole them, but the police hassle Ruby anyway, and she's fired from her job. And we see a little inkling of this in the last episode, sort of the show. But later that week, on her way to Letitia's New Year's party, Ruby meets Caleb, and he takes her to a club instead. They talk about their families and dance the night away. On their way out of the club, Ruby and Caleb are attacked by muggers, but Caleb's powers keep them safe. Caleb brings Ruby to his townhouse, and they spend a blurry night together. I also like that the powers are also sort of the white privilege of like, just, it happens with Christina/Caleb multiple times where they are able to get out of situations that others might not be able to.
Yeah, which is,
reminded me of that classic Dave Chappelle bit where he's hanging out with his white friend and he's like, "Excuse me, officer, excuse me," and he's like freaking out that, you know, high out of his mind. His white friend's like, which way to go to 34th? He's like, hey, down 3 blocks that way. Like that level of, you know, like Ruby is just freaking out because she's like, why is this guy standing up to these muggers? Let's just go. And she's even thinking, I need to run and hopefully they'll be distracted by him and maybe I can get away. But he was just like,
I think about that all the time.
This is my car. Get away from my car, please. But of course he had powers. But yeah, that
But it is, I find that interesting. Maude, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I really love the fact that Ruby, who's, you know, we've seen 2 versions of her, book version and show version now, where she's trying to get a job in a department store, where, you know, she doesn't want to stay in a haunted house, but she does want to have her own sort of livelihood. I love the fact that when she's talking drunk enough to discuss her deepest, darkest desires, she wants to be a Sherpa. Like she's dreaming big. She wants to get out. She wants to be able to have a beautiful view. And straight away, Caleb's like, yeah, that'll be bad on the knees and ankles, won't it? And she's just like, I don't care. Like that just sounds like such a dream to me. And I really liked that moment in the book.
Yeah, that sort of, I just want like space to myself and a beautiful view and to not have to hustle every second of my existence. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So the next morning, Ruby wakes up as a white woman and she can't quite remember. She can't quite remember what happened, but remembers that Caleb offered her a small vial of red liquid. And she runs out of the townhouse and hails a cab. So
before that, though, she has that moment that I love in these books, and that is, this is batshit crazy. This doesn't make sense. I could freak out, but if I freak out, I won't be able to handle this moment. So I'm going to make a choice, and that is to not freak out, and that is to move on, and you know, get to it. And I love that.
No, absolutely, and it shows sort of the characters that they know they've always had to survive. You always have to sort of like, okay, this is happening, what do I do now? And that is a skill set. That is a learned through experience skill set. You know, you talk about book smarts and street smarts and, you know, common sense and all of that. Fight or flight and trying to figure out what the best thing for you to do is, you know, here I am again talking about trauma, but like your body does respond to situations like that when you have trauma. I actually saw something recently that was beyond fight, flight, fawn, forget the other one because it was the mad one and I did not identify with it, but I'll find it and I'll tweet it. But it's this sort of thing of like trying to people please. Or
I don't know, called fight, flight, or fright. Like you're so scared that you don't move.
You freeze too. Yeah, there's that too, but I don't remember what the other one was.
Right. Good.
But yeah, or fawn, where you're just trying to people please to sort of just get them to leave you alone. Like, I'm sorry, you know, that kind of thing, which like I'm very deeply familiar with. But it's interesting that yes, all of these characters, while, you know, maybe if you weren't getting their inner monologue, you would wonder like, why are they so calm about this? But it's really like, I don't have a choice. Because if I freak out, then I'm effed potentially.
Yeah. And the story does need to happen. So I think that up to this point in the book, Matt Ruff has had those examples very cleverly allow the characters to experience what they're going to experience. I know I saw on the internet recently that somebody was like, here's one of the most overused lines in like modern movies and action movies and big spectacle movies is a character saying something like, is this really happening right now? And it's like, at this point, that used to be novel to have a character react or reflect
acknowledge,
and now I think it is overdone, is to have a character acknowledge the insanity of whatever the situation is. Like Hawkeye freaking out in the Avengers movie when they're fighting robots and he's like, and I'm a guy with a bow and arrow. Yeah, you're right. This is nuts. This is nuts. Like, around when that came out, I feel like it was maybe still novel about 5 years ago. But again, recently it feels
there's a god and a Hulk next to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Also, when you're in those like life or death situations, you're partially in shock most of the time too. So you actually aren't necessarily like thinking clearly anyway. You're just like, I gotta get out of here, or I gotta fight someone or whatever. I want to ask you guys, because I thought just the premise of this, obviously there's Jekyll and Hyde, but for the Metamorphosis, did you catch it, Maude?
No.
I never successfully catch anything in my apartment, and neither do my cats. So sometimes I have to swat them, and then it falls, and then they'll be like, snack. It's gross. But the metamorphosis is, a man waking up and turns into a giant insect. And that's obviously not a good thing. And this is sort of this subversion of that, where obviously she's shocked and horrified when she wakes up, but she is treated differently, especially in this era. I just thought that was super interesting of kind of completely subverting that idea of you wake up and you're transformed, and usually it's horrible the whole way, whereas she starts to sort of take advantage of it, which I cannot blame her. But what did you guys have you read the Metamorphosis?
I haven't, but my exposure to the story was like many things in popular culture, The Simpsons.
Yeah.
The Simpsons did a comic book Halloween issue where Homer turns into a big cockroach by the end of this very beautiful little mini story that took place. So I was like, what is this? This feels weird. And then learned that it was who was it that wrote Metamorphosis? Kafka? Yeah. But I think that the transformation, like, I really like this section where Ruby wakes up and she is freaking out. I thought it was very well written. I do like The Simpsons, it turns out. That's right, Nerdist. Excuse me, and beer burp. That horror aspect of it, or the terror of not, like, of realizing when she looks in the mirror that it's another woman, like, all that stuff was really interesting as I was getting through it, because I was like, this is really cool and really well written, and you could feel Ruby's experience. And I love that the main point of this section to me is that white people often have a different experience walking through the world than non-white people. And I also really like the section too where Ruby was at the and we'll talk about it later, but I think it really nailed it when she was at the lodge meeting or whatever. And she describes, like, these white people were talking about me, a black person, but talking as though I wasn't there. And that's different than when you are there. And she's had all these different experiences. And it made me think about, like, I mean, there's so many ways people can relate to that today. It made me think about, like, having like online anonymity. And if you go to a space on the internet somewhere and if people don't know who you are in real life and they kind of assume stuff and, like, talk to you a certain way, like, I've experienced stuff like that. I think a lot of people have. So it was very, I really appreciated the point. And truly, it almost felt like this is a little bit like Matt Ruff is going out of his way to include this point about people's experiences, white people versus non-white people, white people versus black people, to where I was like, this almost feels like it's a little out of place in the Lovecraft thing. Again, there's so many references to Jekyll and Hyde. And that's why I was like, I don't even think this is a Lovecraft thing. I just think this is Matt Ruff, pulling from genre and pulp to, like, bring this story. But then by the end of it, when we get to the end and when Caleb's like, oh, this is how I do it, by the way, this is how I make the potion, I was like, there it is. Yeah. Now it feels like it fits in this story. There's the connection. There's the ongoing overall story. And it really kind of brought the whole section. I think it kind of solidified the whole section as something that worked really, really well. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, and the show does this as well, talking about different genres. But I think, in the Winthrop house, obviously there are a ton of, 50s stories about haunted houses, including our first ever book club episode, Haunting of Hill House. But there are these, like, extra moments that make it more otherworldly or body horror, which is, sort of an offshoot of Lovecraftian horror, not always like tentacles and stuff, but definitely.
By the way, did you guys see the movie with Elizabeth Moss, Shirley? Did you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't love it, but I thought it was.
It didn't have to unique and slice of life, and not. I wanted there to be either, like, more thriller horror to it or more drama to it. It sort of didn't go.
I think the fact that it was based on the author and it was, like, not necessarily, like, biopic-ish, but like kind of borrowed and influenced by it. I think that was holding it back a little bit. I was like, you know what? Just do a standalone movie and go balls to the wall with it. But I think because they kind of tie it back to it being the author, like I'd read the bloody book and I still barely made that correlation because it felt super fictional to me.
Yeah, and it's her, I think it's a novel before, the one that she's writing in the movie is sort of the novel that put her on the map and has sort of tie-ins to the young woman who's staying with them and all of that. But I wish that they would have gone kind of like start biopic, you know, sort of magical realist biopic. Or you could pull a Velvet Goldmine where Todd Haynes wanted to make a David Bowie like magical biopic and David Bowie was like, I don't think so. And so Todd Haynes made a fictional David Bowie character. It's one of my favorite movies. Everyone should watch it. Ewan McGregor and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers smooching it. And that's not the only reason I love it.
Simpsons. And Rachel likes Ewan McGregor. We need a slow.
Likes? We're married?
No.
I wish we were married, but actually I don't want to marry anyone. But from the chat, going back to the book, Matthew Kitson, it really is tragic seeing Hillary/Ruby, interesting way of putting it, excited at all of these new opportunities that are only available to her with the potion. To obtain her dreams, she has to be someone else. Ian Powell agree with this. The Lovecraft thing seems to be less and less a thing as much as the Ray Bradbury influences keep coming up in other horror writers.
Yep.
Totally. Hippolyta disturbs the universe. Hippolyta, that reminded me a lot of Bradbury. Also spooky houses and sort of like, if we get a weird circus in here somewhere, that's definitely Ray Bradbury.
There's only 3 sections left.
Someday.
There's only 3 sections left. I don't know if we're going to get a spooky circus.
Well, then we're going to have to read Something Wicked This Way Comes, because I actually haven't read it in like 15 years. But
I'm going to think of Hogwarts.
Back to the story. So she wakes up, she kind of runs out of the house. She's like, peace, Caleb, don't want to talk to you. Also, well, I guess I can bring this up after I get to this, but want to talk about consent for a second. But and drinking a weird vial of liquid after going home with a dude, because but throughout her whole day, Ruby basically discovers what it's like to live with the privilege of being a white woman. She runs into her former manager and frames her for shoplifting.
I love that moment. It was very, I felt it was the especially the Rodeo Drive sort of moment where you can't shop here. It's that.
Yep. Yeah. And also the sort of like, if you're turned invisible, not when you're a man, because anytime a man in a movie or anything is turned invisible, shit gets gross.
True.
Hollow Man will haunt me forever. But you know, turning invisible or getting magical powers like Teen Witch, it's like, I'm going to be popular. It's this sort of very theoretically innocent wish fulfillment that then you're like, there's repercussions to this, and she gets kind of freaked out that Christina resists the arrest because she's like, well, I didn't, she has this feeling of, well, of course I didn't do this, which is also interesting. She is running away from that.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah. She's running away from that scene when a cop is like, hey, miss, are these kids bothering you? And she's like, no, you want to take me to lunch? She's like, I mean, steal his milk him for all he's worth, that cop, for sure. She goes and gets her hair done. She doesn't have to wait. She talks about needing a job. She's given, this, the information for an agency. Like, everything is coming easy to her. And that is extremely seductive. Like 100% when you have had to work so hard and still get doors slammed in your face at the best. Yeah. Like that's the best case scenario a lot of the time at this time. And then when she goes to the agency, she starts to turn back into herself, which is a very bloody and painful process that made me just feel for her. It's gross, like blood coming out of your nails, but like just this feeling of thinking about it, not in terms of the literal, like, oh, I've been like pretending to be this person and now everyone's going to find out that I'm not. Like, that's such a relatable, minus the magic, feeling of just like, oh shit, I have to get out of here before everyone figures it out. I'm an imposter.
It is a very Cinderella striking, midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, oh gosh, the whole thing's a lie. Yeah. And like I was able to give you the best version of me under the illusion that I was so much better than I am. But now if you see the truth, it all comes crumbling down. But you're right. Like if it's too good to be true.
I was relieved because I was like, oh, thank God, it's not permanent. It's not something that she has to go and, she has to go
and then regret it and be like, oh God, I don't want to be this,
Yeah, I can't turn back. But I knew that the story was going to go to a place where it's like, okay, Ruby's going to turn into this person again. She's going to take on this persona again. That's the point of this section, but also she's going to go talk to Caleb again. So everything that came after this, like, just continued to stress me out because I knew this is going to be, there's some shenanigans happening. It wasn't just going to be a clean cut deal that you could trust Caleb Braithwaite and his whole plan. Yeah.
Well, like the money with the interest, the house, all of those things come with a price, and you don't know what the price is. You didn't knowingly sign up for this, and no matter what Caleb says, I do not believe that it was consensual and that she knew what was going to happen or any of that stuff. And that is just, it could have been on the nose to have sort of like her get jealous, but she was interested in him. They were spending time together. Not that means anything about consent. I'm just saying more so that it could have been more cartoonish. But that, that or lacing someone's drink with drugs that aren't to take advantage of them, but like it's almost like he's getting her hooked on this feeling so that she keeps coming back for more, right?
Again, not a song. You just said that in kind of a sing-songy way, Rachel, but that's not a song, what you just said. It's not.
Was it a song? What did I say? I'm so tired.
Ooga, ooga, chaka.
Oh, yeah, no, I did not say that intentionally.
I would say that Caleb, instead of asking for permission, barely begged for forgiveness, but he knew that if he could get her there, then he had the power over it. But I didn't like that the next day when she's like, how dare you? What the hell was that? That's when that's when he was in a position to spin his own narrative, Like,
100%.
You totally wanted this. You were aware. You took it. You wanted it, and then but it's like, it's after the fact. So you can say anything right now. Yeah, I don't, that was, I don't like
especially if you were in a position where you don't remember. Like, it's just gaslight. There's so many levels of wrong here. Pretending to be someone else. And not know who she is. And then, he sort of breaks down, okay, JK, here's who I really am. Here's what happened. But I feel like unless you were there or Letitia or someone told you from their perspective, there's no way she's going to really understand the level of how bad this dude really is. He's spinning it's like when people men get caught doing something and are like, well, was this actually, it was like, oh, but I'm actually really tortured and and it's just spinning, it's taking the bad thing and using it to just flip it on the person who's calling you out on your shit.
Great comment from Miss Necromancer. She says, I think he was telling the truth about liking her, but not in a genuine way, more like in a way that you like an object that is useful to you. It wasn't genuine human emotion. That's a great observation. And I also feel the same way.
Yep. Just like, you are useful to me in this moment, which is a very
he's a key to him.
Privileged way to think about the world. You think about the hyper billionaires who should not exist, and who get their money from the work of people. They're not earning it. And it's like, well, yeah, I care about my employees. And it's like, well, do you though? I don't know if you do. I don't know if you really do, or you wouldn't have this much money, or you would have solved the Flint water crisis years ago. I don't know if you had all this money. I don't know. I'm tired and caffeinated, but Caleb sort of reveals, I know, Caleb reveals a little bit of who he is and sort of what he's doing and why, tells her about the Order of the Ancient Dawn. definitely is like, so your house that I helped your sister buy, anyone find anything there? Like, I don't know, a key, maybe some maps, I don't know. And then invites her to a party of cultists, which I'm very excited to see in the next episode.
Yeah. I can already picture it though. I mean, I got very Get Out vibes. You know, it's like everyone's having like an outside dinner party and it's all, oh, aren't they fantastic? And then they bid on a person like that.
Yeah, it's very good and very messed up. Yeah, I also like in the trailer for next week, if you haven't read the book, you see her kind of working the party. You see Ruby working a party looking like Ruby, but I like that they don't show anything to kind of hint that maybe she is going to be transformed in this episode. So it's like, unless it would be an interesting, and I have not seen this episode, I swear. So if I'm right, it's just because I'm right. But because I guessed. But the idea of we'd only see her as this red-haired white woman when looking from the men's perspective. But when she's sort of got her own agency and doing her own things, we'd see Ruby as Ruby. That's sort of, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
when you think about sort of Fish or Freaky Friday being in someone else's body type thing, like oftentimes it's just someone acting as someone, but I like that she's there, but they're probably seeing something different. And maybe we only see that interacting with these old evil white dudes.
I think I usually prefer it that way versus having the other actor act like the character you're familiar
depends
with, which can
depends on the actor.
Yeah, it depends on the actor.
I wanted to act like Lindsay Lohan.
Like, I'll give you a great example. In Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey from 1991 or whatever, like 1992, when they die and then come back as like spirits, Bill and Ted realize they can hop into people's bodies. And then Ted, Keanu Reeves, he hops into his dad's body. And the actor who plays his dad like does such a good Keanu that it's great. And then Bill, Alex Winter, he jumps into like that guy's coworker, and then that guy wasn't as good. So it's kind of a bummer to be like, oh, that's not doing a great job. But the dad is wonderful. This is delightful. The other one that I wish that they had done. So yeah, like I said, I normally like to see the actor we're familiar with. Anytime they are in disguise, we, the audience, will see them. But then if the show or movie tells us like other people see them another way, that's fine. However, do you guys remember that Ryan Reynolds movie, R.I.P.D.?
Yes, I sure do.
It was very bad. Terrible movie. Ryan, if you're watching, not good, but I love the Deadpools. But
I think he would acknowledge that.
This movie that he did with Jeff Bridges, similar concept. His character dies, then gets recruited by the RIPD, the Rest in Peace Department. And it's kind of like the Men in Black. And then they go back to Earth and they inhabit people's bodies as they go around and they, solve crimes or whatever. The problem is this, and he's been in the news recently, is that when they go up to the Earth surface world, the two bodies they inhabit are, one of them was a Victoria's Secret supermodel. And then the other one was James Hong, like that legendary actor who everybody was rallying behind him to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yes.
Amazing older Asian guy who's been in.
He's voiced a million characters too. He does a lot of animation.
Been in he has like a credit of like, I don't know, like 1,000.
170 something.
Some insane amount of TV shows.
Someone fact check us, please.
Yes, so it's James Hong and this supermodel, and they're running around, and it's supposed to be like Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges, and I'm like, I wish the movie was this. I wish the movie was these two actors, and we only got Ryan Reynolds in the beginning of the movie, and then it's like bookends, because I would watch the hell out of a movie where James Hong is running around, and he had like a banana, and the joke was that he had a banana, but in the spirit world, it's this cool like Men in Black style gun. 600 credits that guy had.
Who?
What's that?
Who played who?
I can't remember, but it didn't matter. The point is that the movie should have been James Hong and this actress pretending to be Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges. Amazing. And that would have been amazing.
I one that I love, I promise we will get back to the book, but is Community when, and it's also a really well-written episode about Troy and Abed.
In the morning.
And in the morning, and they swap bodies, and both of them are just amazing actors and do such a good job, and it just is the cutest thing. Back to the party. So we're back to the Order of the Ancient Dawn, that old chestnut, these old fuckers, and sorry, and basically Caleb instructs Ruby to just sort of like be quiet, look cute, and listen to what everyone is saying. And we also get to meet a character that we met actually in the show last week, who's the head of the Chicago Lodge of the Order of the Ancient Dawn, Lancaster.
Yeah.
And he sort of admits, okay, yes, fair. I am the one who torpedoed that whole ritual that killed my dad, but I swear I did it for a good reason. Trust me, 100%. Let's, unite all of the lodges. Let's see who should be the best leader. Everyone kind of come with your A game on Midsummer's Day. Definitely not a spooky time, a pagan time. Anyone who believes Caleb is an idiot, because it's like, yeah, I just killed my dad and the whole order.
But hear me out.
But I'm gonna let us just have sort of a conversation about who should be the leader. No, obviously he's gonna rig this whole thing. Anyway, I thought they were all dumb. We get we see the Book of Names, which has recently been stolen. And Caleb says, I'll give you some pages from this. Also, don't trust him here. If you just kind of give me a shot, let me unify the Order of the Ancient Dawn. I don't care who's in charge. Definitely doesn't need to be me or anything. And all of these pieces of the puzzle, both on the show and in the book, are starting, like Hector, you were saying that, where is the story going? How did these all connect? But I do feel like it's little artifacts. Yeah, Hector, are you frozen or alive?
No, I'm alive. I'm here.
Okay, I was like, what?
I got a text from the USPS about something, and
that's totally fair. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to call you out.
Not at all. No.
I wasn't sure if you were frozen.
The good news is I checked the text because I'm like, what is this? They sent me something.
Your package is on its way.
It was just for a survey, and I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. But support the USPS. They're great. They're amazing.
Yes, please do. But yeah, so we've got the Book of Names. We have the portal. I'm sure there are other elements that I'm forgetting now, but they're just kind of all of these little pieces. I guess Atticus his blood, and sort of he activates a lot of the magic, but it feels like everything is sort of coming together.
Culmination of all factors.
Here's a great comment. I got to read this from the Tamaranian.
Please do.
Ain't no party like a cultist party, because a cultist party don't end until you've summoned an earth-swallowing, madness-causing eldritch terror.
Oh my God. Nerdist, can we tweet that? Can you tweet that, please?
Tamaranian's fire in the comments tonight.
Give Miss Necromancer credit.
That was a Tamaranian. That was a Tamaranian.
Oh, Tamaranian. I'm so sorry. But two very wise fans of book club who every time y'all send us messages, we're like, oh God. So just wrapping up some of this part, we get to Ruby and Caleb sleeping together. She notices the mark of Cain on his chest, which is
no big deal. Don't even worry about it. I know it looks satanic.
The guy who kills his brother, just a whole demonic plot thing. She agrees to help him with his plan in exchange for the elixir. There's a really great discussion about Jekyll and Hyde, where with Letitia and Atticus and one of Letitia's tenants about are Jekyll and Hyde two different entities, or is one sort of the
excuse? We watched Fight Club.
Well, and I always thought of, as I've been reading, I thought in this section that, God, what's her alter ego's name now? I'm forgetting.
Hillary
Everest.
Hillary is her way of sort of wish fulfillment, or what you would do if you you didn't have to worry about the repercussions, but not that she was a different entity. So I'm interested to see if
this is a very obvious trope in a lot of fantasy-esque type things about how to get a woman to do your bidding, and that is to grant her something that she wants, and that is usually in The Little Mermaid, it's legs in exchange for a voice. In Starlight or Stars Dust, it was youth. A lot of the time, it's being able to stay young forever. And there is obviously a massive exploitation because it's like, do all this really dumb shit and I'm going to give you a taste of it and I'm going to slowly leak information. But it's basically becoming indentured to this thing that is taking precedence over everything else. It's like family, friends, they don't matter because you've given me, you know, a bite out of the apple that I can't stop eating now.
Bite out of the apple.
It wasn't an accident.
I know, but that was really smart, and I just wanted to call it out. That was really good.
Also, I really like the quick little aside that Ruby had about the mark of Cain and how she goes into like her background with religion and how somebody was telling her that like that Black people are bad because they're not white, and that was and then Ruby like justified about being like, no, if what you think is true, then you need to reread that section of the Bible because it's a protection spell. And Ruby goes, and if anybody had the protection, it would be white people that had the protect, which I thought was a very interesting way to describe in a biblical sense the sort of different experiences that different ethnicities have in our modern world, which I thought
what
was...
you need protecting from? You're a white man. Yeah.
Well, but if you're thinking that, you know, if racist white people are thinking that Black people have the mark of Cain or are coming from Cain and it's protection, then it's like, well, no, history would show that y'all had it, so you were evil. And like, not wrong. Generally speaking, not wrong. So Ruby leaves a charm on the desk of Captain Lancaster because obviously Caleb is up to no good. And then we get to, Hector, what you mentioned, the Lovecraftian body in a coffin, just tubes of blood.
Nope.
Reason that vial of liquid was red.
It was very Frankenstein-esque, which I really liked. It's this experimental mad scientist kind of, but hear me out. I mean, if you look at it, it looks really bad, but here's why it's not, you know, and you're like, okay.
She was gonna die anyway.
This is how science works. You have to test. You gotta test things.
She wants it because it's what I would want, and she can't exactly talk, so I'm just going to assume. What's the harm in that?
I wonder too, because once I want to talk about the show a little bit. I might save my extremely long quote about the show that I wrote. We might have time. Not that I wrote, but wrote down. That we've already seen sort of in the show, the experiments on Black people that Hiram Winthrop was doing. So I wonder too if those dots are going to connect in a different way in the show, where they kind of bring this in this episode, and you kind of see where those things might connect before Winthrop or Hiram and Titus. There's too many people with the same last names. Hiram and Titus like split, and sort of were like, we're not friends anymore. I wonder if that's going to connect too. So yeah, before we get into the show, do you think that Ruby is on the hook? Do you think she's going to keep taking that elixir?
Yes, because her first chance at it, like she had the mild freak out and then just ticked boxes. And like, it wasn't
blame her at all.
It wasn't her testing it. It wasn't like, can I do this? She knew what she now had the power to do. She didn't question things. It was like, I can now confidently ask a police officer out and go like and get him to like me like that. Like, I think that this is something she's been waiting for. And we see hints of it in the show as well, where it's so obvious that there are so few opportunities for her. But if she just was able to get her foot in the door, you know, a little bit more, or just be not Black, you know, then there'd be so many more doors open for her. So I think that we know that Caleb is someone who's been studying this family and has been literally paving the path for them to walk down. So he knows that Ruby's sort of like desire to become ambitious and to have a life and fulfillment, not through someone else, but on her own volition, was the perfect candidate for this.
Yeah. I think that Ruby is by herself, she's in too deep. I think that, but if this story did not have any other characters that we had gotten to know, like Atticus or Letitia, that if this was Ruby, we'd be, oh, this is the end of the tragic story. She's just stuck now. She's hooked and that's it. I believe that Ruby, I'm hoping that when these stories sort of converge at the end, which is what I think is going to happen by the end of this book, that Ruby will like tell Letitia what's been happening, and Letitia will be able to tell Ruby what she's been dealing with at the house, and all these different things will happen, and then the families and sort of people connected will team up and be able to defeat the Braithwaites and kind of hopefully make everything good. I also think that Caleb was lying when he said that this woman Delilah was experiencing dreams. I think she's straight up vegetative state. I think she's in a coma and that's it. And I think
she's in like hell.
I'm going to go one further. I think she's in excruciating pain.
Yeah. Yep.
I think they're controlling every woman in this picture, and is speaking on behalf of other people, is planting seeds. Yeah, no, none of it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she might be awake and just like laying there feeling everything. She could be in a like Cthulhu hellscape dimension for all like Angel. I'm bringing back Buffy because I'm rewatching Buffy, but there's all these, there's no way that she's gonna die anyway, or like any of that kind of thing. It's like, no, you're evil. I don't trust anything he says.
Yeah. But everything is the greater good, and you're like,
but it is that like seductive temptation of, once you get a taste of what life could be if XYZ, if you could do all of these things that you've always wanted, that would be so hard. I do not think, and there are examples of that in tons of pop culture where people do get seduced by the dark side or other things. And it is their connections with other people or their friends just yanking them out of there, being like, you'll thank me later. And they're, fighting it tooth and nail. You do need a support system. I mean, you don't need to. People can do things on their own. But like, I do think that it's a powerful thing to have a support system, and to have this support system of people who have all experienced not just their own trauma, but generational trauma. And I want to see them beat this. I want to see them beat these culty white dudes so bad.
I just read your theory and it's blowing my mind.
Yeah, can you talk about that? It's very interesting.
Okay. So we have not seen, someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I have not like gone back and watched it to make sure that I'm right, because who cares? But I think William in the show Lovecraft Country might actually be Christina, because we haven't, as far as I know, we haven't seen them in the same place together yet. And it could be an interesting way, much like Ruby is drinking an elixir to look a certain way, that Christina, when she does need to navigate herself in the world of men in a certain way, especially if it's the body of someone important, like if it was, I don't know, Hiram Winthrop's son who disappeared, who would be the same age, then you'd think, oh, well, I'll listen to this guy instead of this C word, as the guy as Lancaster in the last episode said. And yeah, I just think that would be an interesting way to show how.
I want to add on to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, yes.
The reason why it was blowing my mind is because you look at what scenario requires Christina and what scenario requires William. So Ruby has a very convoluted relationship with Letitia. She's a very sure person. She's not necessarily filled with resentment, but it's like a very hard way to kind of get in with her. Boom, enter William, and he's able to seduce her. And that's what happened. She connected with him over a fun night of dancing. That couldn't have happened with Christina, but that's why it was needed for that one. Letitia having Atticus and doesn't want to flirt with a guy at all. But Ruby is kind of like pushing her away. The interactions that we've seen have been between Letitia and Christina. Atticus, on the other hand, like, I think being in the war or like whatever it is that he's had, the relationships are between Christina and him. Maybe Christina's less threatening.
He's a gentleman.
Right.
Theoretically.
Right.
Did you see the way he talks?
No, at the start of this, he thinks himself as a gentleman. There we go.
But he tried to.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I know we don't have a bunch of time. I would love to get to talking about Lovecraft Country episode 4 because I was scrolling through what you wrote, Rachel, and I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. And I'm very disappointed in how the last episode. I'm disappointed that what happened in the last episode was the cliffhanger, and we couldn't see what the story is going to. We have to wait a week to see what the story is going to be. I thought, man, you guys really you messed up because
don't do this. Yeah.
If this is a story element that will be explored, undone, reversed, talked about, however it's going to affect the show, for you guys to leave it as an exciting cliffhanger, shocking moment is just going to, it's just very disappointing. But so if you can, please.
Yeah, I feel like we can, Alex will tell us if we can't go a tiny bit over, but yeah, it's upsetting because I loved the episode up until the end. And I do want to celebrate that. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the show and the after show, and we can get to other points. But, and I do have a long quote, but it's from theroot.com, a really great analysis of a history of violence. But the ending, spoilers, if you haven't watched it, it felt not only like we introduced a non-gender specific character in a way that was more gazy than anything else we've seen in the show. Mm-hmm. And the fact that this character is introduced and you hear their story not through their own words ever. We don't even get subtitles, so it's all through Atticus. Yeah. And then they're murdered within 10 minutes. And when you think about, how smart this show is, how smart this book is about the real life stories behind this and the parallels between, this era and today, where trans women, especially trans women of color, are killed. It really sat poorly with me, and I did not have the words to really express that. That was my jumbling version of that. So I just want to read just a snippet from theroot.com's analysis of a history of violence, which is the title of the episode. Highly recommend reading the whole thing. It's a really great breakdown of horror and history and all of these things. But here we go. The final scene features a presumably cis Black man slitting the throat of a two-spirit indigenous person in a direct attempt to silence her or them. In the show, according to Atticus, their pronouns are her and them. Erasing important knowledge only just recovered after she was kidnapped, imprisoned, and silenced in a different way, effectively a different type of death, by the white colonizer Titus Braithwaite. This is significant because Yahima is rightfully being read by viewers as third-gendered, intersex, or trans-adjacent person. The horror genre itself has a problematic history of violence against women, femmes, and POC, but the term also applies to the violence of Titus Braithwaite as a colonizer and enslaver. It's also relevant to Montrose's history as a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre, an abuser of his son, and the murder of Yahima in such a vicious and violent manner. This episode also begs a conversation on the grander narrative of the structural violence of hierarchies, the problematic construct of our Western society that pushes the oppressed to become the oppressor. Brilliant, brilliant piece. I will send the link to be posted in the chat so that everyone can read it. But I do think the cliffhanger element of it really does it a disservice, because I wonder and suspect that the oppressed becoming the oppressor, as it is with Christina,
right,
is entirely part of this. We know that Montrose was abused by his own father, survived the Tulsa race riots, and is potentially not a straight man, just based on the last episode in the show. because this doesn't happen in the book. And there is a way to, I think I don't know how to do it. And obviously we're critiquing things and I don't know how to make it, but I get the thinking behind it, and to show, especially through the museum, the impact of colonization and of stealing cultures and of stealing people, and the fact that even if that happens to you, that doesn't mean you might not do it to someone else. Mm-hmm. But by ending it on that note and, brutally silencing this voice before they even have a chance to really speak beyond Atticus translating for them.
And they were even like, we're gonna teach her English, so that she, like, I was like, oh, she's gonna be a character in the show now. This is gonna be interesting to. And then
I would have, that would, and I just, there is the barrier gaze trope, and there are a lot of different, reasons that murdering this character does not sit well, understandably. But they're also, if you were going to have that be a part of the conversation, I would but I think it would work better in the execution to tie that into what happens with Montrose. And I have not seen the next episode. I do know that it gives a lot of context for Montrose, is what I've heard. But I just think, this is it's been the one miss for me in the show.
It felt very backwards.
And I imagine they have the best of intentions, as many of us do, but that also doesn't necessarily matter.
But like someone who's been punished for what feels like decades, if not centuries.
Centuries.
And were
1700s to 1950s.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So, and their curse was that they were like a siren, so they weren't able to communicate and they could only screech. So to silence someone that was sentenced to be silenced,
And as far as I know, it's not in, maybe we'll get to a section in the book where they're drawing from this, but I just think the gaze of it was one. Like, as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, we've barely looked at anyone's body parts besides like Atticus's butt, which but also it's a female gaze, which we don't get a lot, I love all butts, but like Tina. But just like, I feel like that's a subversion of what we normally get. Mm-hmm. And everything else has been it doesn't feel like you're leering. And this whole thing and Montrose saying, what are you? And those kinds of things. And then silencing them twice.
Mm-hmm. But I know why they're doing that.
I think missed the mark.
This whole episode is discovering that Montrose knows far more than he's letting on. Right. And he even says that to Atticus. He's like, you just won't stop. Like, I've had to involve myself because I've spent so much energy trying to dissuade you in a very subtle way to not follow this path, but you just won't stop. So now I've got to get in there. And so this, again, is the key, the answer. They're going to invest in her so that they can extract the answers and understand more. Mm-hmm. And because of that, that's a threat. So then Montrose has to step in and handle it. But I think that's
also like
the point of introducing.
She can't even speak. She can't speak. She doesn't speak English. Like, did it have to happen? Like, I think it's more so. I get Montrose being like, I'm not letting my son.
Atticus can understand her though.
Hmm?
So she could technically speak because Atticus could understand.
That's true. Oh, yeah. But she can't because she's a siren now.
Right.
I couldn't even talk at all. Yeah, so that's
first. So it's, if it had happened later where they figure out how to communicate, obviously it's easy for us to sit and say you should have done this and this. But for a show that I think has been so thoughtful and really
it was a very big
research, and it just sort of was like
it felt like a classic TV cliffhanger, and I'm like, but you guys haven't been doing the classic thing.
You need that.
You guys haven't been doing that. If that moment had happened at the beginning of the next episode and the entire episode got to be like, we're gonna deal with this, I would have been like, okay, what's the story reason for this?
Why did he do this?
Very but to have it be cliffhanger, and I went, you guys are just gonna understandably make everybody question why that decision happened. And since we have no more further context, it's just about
just feels like a huge blind spot.
Yeah, discussing that negative aspect for a week, as opposed to this show. All the episodes are out, so just watch the next one. Like it's different.
Or it happening in the context where you can provide some answers to that. And it sucked too, because I really loved this episode up until that point, and was just like, and texted a few of my friends, because there are moments when you see something in a show that you love or a movie that you love, and it is something that you see all the time, like violence against trans people, and that's deeply traumatic, and it sucks, and I hope that it brings itself back from that. But as soon as I watched it, I was like, no, like, why?
We spent a lot of time discussing how these Black women have an amazing application of logic in these strenuous situations. But with her, she had to be knocked out because she was too hysterical.
Because she was screaming and yeah.
Well, and also the Root piece, which again I highly recommend, talks about the sort of, there are so many levels. I hesitate to even describe the argument because I worry that I'm not going to do it justice, but there are hierarchies, much like, when I think about men, it's, it sucks to be a woman sometimes. I also know, but I'm at the most privileged I could be as a cis white woman. There are hierarchies throughout all different kinds of cultures and backgrounds and everything. And this experience or this scene is actually, it ties back to a lot of historical data and what we allow certain people to be. I'm gonna mess it up. So go read the article. It's really well done. Other than that, because I don't want to end on that note, what did you think of the episode before? We were like, I'm not even gonna say that, but what did you think of the sort of Indiana Jones vibe? How do you feel about Letitia and Atticus and what happened there?
Oh, the smoochies, because they went through
the smooch after. I mean, I understand it because I have smooched some guys who were clearly not being nice to me. But I was like, she should just be like, you stop it. You've been a little jerk this whole episode.
Yeah, I was kind of mixed on it up to the end, because not my favorite section in the book, but the book felt a little bit more, here's a secret museum stuff, which I think is interesting, even though it had that weird missile that they were like dodging that I didn't quite understand the logistics of. Then we watched the episode, and it's less about hidden stuff in a museum and more about there's hidden caverns underneath, and that was Indiana Jones, and that was super cool. I mean,
I like the fact that when they were in the museum, they were subconsciously retaining the information that would go on to help them through the quest. It's very
loved it. And Letitia breaking the glass and throwing the map down. As soon as Tick is like, we need the map, she's like, all right, done. And they're like, no, don't. that stuff was fun. But then, towards the end, it got a little bit, I don't want to say confusing, but so different from the book that I was like watching it and I'm going, okay, I have no frame of reference. So what is happening? And we just kind of taken along for the ride.
Yeah, they cram a lot too, where you're like, okay, there's a hand in here, there's the blood. And I was like, oh, well, Montrose has the book, so they're Legends of the Hidden Templing this thing. But like for an episode of TV, they pack so many like puzzles in it.
Yeah.
And they're only down there for, half the episode, not even, less than half. Yeah. That it was like, if you haven't read the book, not that that would necessarily help you in this case, but like, it's sort of, there's too many puzzles and they're solving them very quickly. Maybe get rid of one puzzle.
I actually did
some sort of mistakes.
When they got through the gate, it was like the door, like that was a very stressful moment where like the bridge is running out and then they're like, it's
advertising,
and then this, and then it just clicks open. I was like, hold on, what just happened? That was so fast, and it didn't have enough time to, well, obviously this time wasn't.
Yeah, because it was like God creates man, then creates Eve, then monster, blah, blah, blah. But even as he was yelling it, I was like, I'd be like, slow down.
Yeah.
Which one do I think?
Are they pushing it? Like, that wasn't really clear either. The way that it was shot, it wasn't, done super.
It was very much in Legends of the Hidden Temple, the 3 Ps. Is it a monkey?
There's
Silver monkey. Where you're like, big on the bottom, medium in the middle, small on the top. What are you doing? Anyway.
It's Skyrim for all my gamers out there.
Oh, man. Well, that's it for now, except it's not. We are going to go to the after show. We're going to talk more about this on our after show. But first, your homework for next week is to read the next section of Lovecraft Country, The Narrow House. You can check out previous episodes of Nerdist Book Club on Nerdist YouTube or Geek and Sundry's Twitch channels. Make sure you like and subscribe. Share with your friends. Tell them that we're just silly, and that's all I would say. And make sure that you watch our Dune trailer reaction video from this morning. Super, super fun, and is the reason that I'm over caffeinated. And Maude, where are we going next?
Oh yeah, we're going to Discord. Geekbomb's Discord can be accessed if you join the lowest tier for patreon.com/geekbomb. You'll get access to the after show. There's a bunch more really cool stuff happening there, but we are going to head over there right now and continue this conversation, do a fun Q&A, and talk about more, I guess, of the show and how we're feeling about it all.
And more book stuff. And also, I will just say, because I was excited, that also on Patreon, I don't know the specifics, but you're doing Fungeons and Flagons. And someone very cool is going to be on it.
Yes, Hector's going to be coming back for season 3 of Fungeons and Flagons. It's going to be so great. You've got no idea.
I'm very excited. I saw it and I was like, well, first I saw the mystery image and I was like,
who's that cast member?
I really thought I was like, I bet that's Hector, but then I didn't want to be dumb and guess the wrong thing, so I didn't say anything. And then I saw the reveal and was like, nailed it.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll see you guys on the Geekbomb Discord for the after show, or on Twitter, or next week.
Yeah, BYO over there, guys. Have fun.
BYO. Wait, what does that mean?